After a monumental, nearly year-long effort to end US involvement in the conflict in Yemen, we had progress in both the House and the Senate. Eventually, we had votes to pull us out of that conflict, drawing a presidential veto, unfortunately. But that does not mean that the effort stops there. And joining us now to break down update on getting us out of that conflict is co-director of Just Foreign Policy, Hassan Al-Tayyab. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So it's been a little bit since we last spoke, something like a month or so. And so has there been any movement in the right direction on once again pushing for some limit on how we're getting involved in that Saudi-led conflict on Yemen?
Yes, there actually has. In this past week, during consideration of the national defense budget, the House just voted to end arms sales to Saudi, or to go back to before the emergency declaration that that Trump declared to push through $8.1 billion of weapons sales through. And that there was an amendment that got attached to the defense appropriations bill. And so that was introduced by Representative Ted Lieu. On the Senate side, actually today there's some news as well. They just voted and passed with a 53-vote majority to block the 22 arms sales as well. It's unclear whether or not we have enough votes at this point to block the veto override, to do a veto override if that should happen. Trump has threatened to do that, but there's some promising signs that Congress isn't going to just let their ability to, have oversight over the Arms Export Control Act.
So I believe that you implied there that he will veto that block, which I think is 100% true. And in terms of the votes to override that veto, I really wonder if it's really a question of this particular vote, or really considering the personality characteristics of Donald Trump, whether Republican senators would ever override one of his vetoes. I have to imagine that would lead to him opposing them in their next election. There probably has to be quite a bit of fear, I assume.
For sure, I think that there is, no one wants to get a tweet with their name on it from Donald Trump, that's for sure. But I wanted to stress that they have, if they stand united, they have a real chance to do this, because the defense budget is a must-pass bill. It's typically not vetoed. The president, signs it because it's this large spending package, and it's hard to go after individual line items. So Congress really does have the power of the purse here. So I think if they stand united, they can block these arms sales. And also embedded in that, I didn't mention, but embedded in the House version of the defense appropriations bill, there's other language in there to block logistical support. So we wouldn't just be stopping the arms sales. We could stop the mid-air refueling and the logistical support, in addition to training of Saudi Air Force and UAE Air Forces.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. I'm glad that you added that, because my fear was that they would find some way to move around the money. But if it has specific prohibitions against those sorts of things, that would be progress. Although I believe that they claim that the mid-air refueling ended months ago. Isn't that the official line from the Pentagon?
Yeah, so in November, they officially, they let Congress know that they would stop the mid-air refueling. As far as we know, that cessation of the mid-air refueling has stopped, but to get it definitively, in writing, in law, I think that would be another critical step.
I'm also curious, while we're dealing with the situation in Yemen and have been for some time, every day it seems like there's another attempt to escalate the situation with Iran. How does that complicate efforts in the House or the Senate to do something about Yemen?
I think it actually increases the urgency to restrain Saudi Arabia and, to kind of put up, some protection so we're not going to be waging unconstitutional war. I will say that there's also legislation that was introduced by Senator Udall and Representative Eshoo that's being attached to the National Defense Authorization Act that would also prevent funds going to an unauthorized war with Iran. So there are some connections. A lot of times you hear the opposition say that, well, the Houthis are Shia and therefore they're connected to Iran. While there are some connections, it's very limited. So there's a lot of talk about connecting the Houthis to Iran. I think what's really interesting, though, that not enough people are talking about is that they're saying under the 2001 AUMF that they have authority to go after Iran because Iran is somehow tied to Al Qaeda, which is absolutely preposterous. Iran, they're Shia, and Al Qaeda is Sunni. You know who is Sunni, though, is Saudi Arabia, and they have been working with Al Qaeda hand in hand in Yemen in their anti-Houthi army on the ground. So I think it's preposterous to blame Iran for working with Al Qaeda when Saudi Arabia is working with Al Qaeda and funding them every day.
I literally could not agree more. And thank you, as always, for joining us. Very important updates there. And we appreciate you keeping us appraised on the situation.
Hey, thank you so much.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.